In this new series of videos, we're going to begin to explore lighting within Maya and Mental Ray, explore some different lights, see how they react, and see how we can modify them with Mental Ray shaders. And in this lesson in particular, we're going to be focusing first on area lights. And then we're going to move to the next lesson, which will be modifying the area lights with some Mental Ray shaders. So with that said, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is just, again, we have our kind of a simple psych setup. And a few odd shapes that really obviously mean nothing. And so really all we're going to want to do is just come up here to create lights, and we're going to create an area light. And right away we can see it's quite small in the scene, so I'm going to scale it up, and we can begin to see that we have this shape that's associated with the light. Okay, and we have this pointer that points to the direction of the light. I'm just going to put on use default material for now so we can see a little bit better. So basically this defines the shape of your light, and the pointer defines the direction in which it goes. This thing can be scaled in a variety of ways. Right now we're just going to actually leave it square. There we go. And I'm going to just kind of rotate it. We can look through it just like any other light, so I can kind of back off of it. This doesn't give you as much control as like looking through a spotlight does, but for our purposes right now, actually I don't actually like that. You can also hit the T key like you can with any light, and that'll give you your manipulators. And I'm just going to snap this one down to the central axis there, so I know that I'm going to be pivoting around the axis. I'm going to move the light into a position that I like a little bit better. Okay. Just get a little bit of front lighting on it. Yeah, I think for our purposes right now, that's going to work just fine. So I'm going to come back over to camera still, come into a position that I like, and let's just take a look at the rendering with the default settings. Well, we can see that the renderer is obviously very blown out. It's very bright. The light size is having a lot to do with that. Also, we don't have shadows turned on, so let's do that. So let's come down here to this light. And under area light, we'll get into these settings later, but under the shadow setting, let's just come here and say use ray trace shadows. Again, let's leave them at their default settings. Let's snap off another render and see what happens. Okay, we're getting pretty grainy shadows, and again, the light's pretty blown out. So let's begin to look at that light real quick. Okay, now the light's awfully large, so let's say we were to scale it down in size. Okay, let's come back here, snap off another render. Well, the whole point of this really quickly was just to illustrate that the size of the area light is going to dictate to a large degree the amount of illuminance the light is going to have. So with that said, obviously this is not big enough for, I just want to get a general lit scene, and then we're going to start controlling the light in a different way very shortly. So I'm going to put it back to right about there. I think that'll do something somewhat okay for us. I'm going to come back right there just so we can get a little bit of that curvature in there and snap off another render. Yeah, okay, it's a little hot, no big deal. Obviously the shadows are very grainy. A lot of this has to do with the quality settings within our render settings. But for right now this will work because we want to render really fast. So you can see, though, that if we increase the shading settings, that we're going to get these kind of nice, very orthogonal, soft shadows. And so, just quickly, let's go through this light, and I'm going to come into another view here, and I'm going to come into the perspective view here. So let's just quickly go through these settings, okay? And so we've got right now, we've got our area light, we've got this big giant rectangle. We don't have use light shape on in the Mental Ray settings. So basically this is kind of like translating, like a Maya area light translating directly into Mental Ray rather than kind of a Mental Ray centric area light. So if you look in the area light settings, let's just close this up so you can see where it is. Under the shadows, you can see there's a Mental Ray tab, and you want to click that open. Again, leave this at 1, which will be very important. You'll see in a little bit why. And under the Mental Ray tab, you can see that there's an area light tab. And so let's click on Use Light Shape. Okay, so now that we've done that, again, let's just snap off a real quick blender to see what the difference is between the two. Let's put this in the buffer. So you can see already with that used light shape that we're getting a much nicer softening, because now it's really functioning much more like an area light. It's nowhere near as, put it in the buffer, we can kind of compare, nowhere near as grainy as just a direct mental ray translation. We're getting a lot more even distribution rather than these hot spots. And just for that very reason alone, you always want to turn that on. So let's look at the shadows a little bit, and let's go back to this light, go back to the perspective view, just so that we can see the difference. And let's look what happens when we turn that light, instead of a rectangle, into like a disc. Okay, so if you can see now, that square has become a circle. So the light will be being lit from a circular shape. So the light will be lit from a circular shape rather than that previously defined square. So let's just put this into the buffer, make sure. And let's snap off another render. Okay, I mean, I think it should be immediately clear that the shape of the shadow is changing depending upon the shape of the actual area light. Okay, so again, let's put it in the buffer, and we can just kind of cross compare real quick. These are rendering very fast. So you can see that, I mean, again, it's a subtle difference, but the difference is definitely there. And you can see that this one kind of has this slight straight edge elongation going down, right down in here, that the round one doesn't have. So we got that one. So let's just move on to the next shape. The next shape is a sphere, and you know, I mean, let's do it. Why not? So now this being lit by a round shape, and let's make sure that's in the buffer, which it is, but just in case. Snap off a render with the sphere. Now spheres, you know, you can see it's almost like the disc. It's not that much different, and I don't find myself using that one a lot, but the option is there. And I think that it's kind of meant to kind of simulate like a round omni light that's an area light. There's a variety of ways of also, you know, like doing that with geometry lights or whatever, but again, I don't see the payoff. We can graph it, and we can kind of compare the two, and you can see it's a very subtle difference. The only difference being is that, I mean, it says right now we're at really low samples, but I think that the spherical one seems to take longer in longer calculations. Now then we've also got the cylinder, which that is a let's just look at that more like a fluorescent. We'll scale it down and see what happens. This one will be interesting because we'll pull it up and we'll look at this one in a few different ways. So this is going to represent more like a fluorescent tube, you know, hopefully. Now, so you can see that the shadows become grainy real fast. This is a longer, we need to get more shading samples in the shadows as well as in the render itself in order for this one to calculate well. We can see that it took, you know, about 3 seconds longer than the other renders, and it will take longer. And truthfully, I'm not sure that it's still 100% performing correct. But we're going to get it, and we're going to tune it so that it does. Right? So with that said, let's just move back to these area light settings. Okay, so right now, we can look down here, and I'm going to keep it on cylinder for right now. And we're going to look at these high samples, high sample limit, and low samples, and visible, which we'll look at in a little bit. Okay, so now let's just set this, let's try 16, 16, and 8. And in order for this to really be represented well, we're going to also have to come back into our quality settings here and set our sampling quality within mental ray itself to be a little bit higher than it is, because right now we're at 1 and we're on Gaussian. Gaussian is very good for animation. For stills, I tend to use Mitchell if you get sharper stills. And we're setting it to a max sample level of 3. That can stay where it's at, and Mitchell with a sampling level of 4. And under my ray tracing settings, everything is at 1. We don't have any transparency. That's no big deal. So with that said, let's just snap off a render. This one's going to take a little bit longer, so I'll pause the video once the render gets started. Well, you can see now that the render's done that one thing we've done is we've definitely slowed it down a little bit here. We've gone from about 20 seconds or so to about 2 minutes and 58 seconds. And again, we could fine-tune this for speed and get that up in a variety of ways. I'm not really doing that this lesson, but it's still area lights will slow your scene down. There's no doubt about it. And when you set them to cylinder, they're going to slow it down the most. But you can see that we're getting some nice soft shadows that are radiated out. You know, when I look at the surface of the diffuse looks a little bit strange to me, which we'll begin to explore in the next lesson. But overall, I think that the quality settings and the quality of the light for what we want is doing what we want. So with that said, let's just quickly kind of go over this area light again. You just, you can make the lights very easily in the Create Lights area light section. And down here under the attributes, again, we haven't adjusted the intensity at all. The intensity right now is kind of being controlled by the size of the light, but we will come back to ways to control the intensity of an area light, but not with that chiclet. You just turn shadows on normally, how you would in the ray trace shadow attributes, and then you can control the sampling of the area light itself within the sample settings as well as the shape. Okay, and we've got use light shape. And now we've got this one last chiclet here, visible, and I'm going to turn that on for this. And in order to do this, the one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to add in very quickly, I want to add in a purely reflective plane so we can take a look at something real quick. All right, so I'm just going to come up here. I'm going to add a polygonal plane. I'm just going to scale it up a little bit, move it up in Y. I'm actually just going to leave the high degree of tessellation for right now because it's just not that much geometry. Okay. Come here, I'm going to open up the hypershade. And I am going to make, for this, I will make a Maya blend. And I'm going to make it 100% reflective. I'm going to turn the color all the way down. I'm going to turn the specular and the reflectivity all the way up. And give it a large degree of hard specularity. Okay, for now, let's see what happens with that. Reflectivity is 1, specular color is 1. Just assign that to that plane. Come back to the camera view. Again, this render is going to take a little bit longer. Let's also just quickly assign some color now that we've seen how the area light reacts. So I'm going to just come back to the hypershade real quickly here. I'm going to duplicate that Lambert. I'm going to keep one I'm going to take the Lambert. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to change this one to let's change it to like a steely blue. Let's see. Yeah, that'll work for my purposes there. Just duplicate that again real quick. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to make that a nice orange. I like blue and orange. Okay. Close this thing. Close that thing. Assign that one the blue. That one the orange. Smooth shaded. Just going to do wireframe unshaded. Default. This is staying white. We've got this pure reflective plane. So let's just come back here. I'm going to snap off a render and then I'm going to pause because this one will take a while again, and I'll be right back. Okay, well there we are. We've got our purely reflective plane. We're getting a lot of obviously reflectivity in white, and we've got our objects reflecting, and obviously you can see where the top of the cyc runs off. And now the reason that I really wanted to do this is really quick is just so that we can look at the light with this highly reflective surface, these diffuse surfaces in this room, so that we can see how the light is behaving and falling off of the surfaces without any mental ray shaders attached to that light, so that we can move on to the next lesson where we start to add in the mental ray shaders.